So thanks for coming along, and I'm going to hear my slightly sort of rambling thoughts on the railway and Blair Atholl. I could have said just as easily that it was entitled Blair Atholl and the Railway. You know, did the railway come to Blair Atholl, or did Blair Atholl come to the railway? It's a bit of both, really, because as General Wade's roads were superseded by Thomas Telford's roads, the existing settlements of Blair Atholl and Bridge of Tilt were supplanted by a planned village around the mill and the new hotels on the new road. And the new settlements retained those names, and the existing settlements were prefixed with old. So, I only know of one photo of Blair Atholl before the railway came. And this has been taken from Garryside, looking over to the hotel. So that's going to be about 1860 or before. Okay, so you've got Gary, there's Garryside there, and there's the hotel there. And the railway would have come along there. It isn't there. That's the only photograph that I know like that. Okay. Unfortunately, you can't talk about railways without first looking at a map, so I do apologise. So here we go with the railway. So to connect Inverness to the south, Inverness is here, connect it to the south. The townspeople wanted to do it on their own terms, not be subject to the whims and aims of others, and in general not to bow to speculators down south, and in particular not to bow to those pesky Aberdonians. There were three ways south. The easy way is around the coast, Aberdeen and down. The second way is down the Great Glen and down to Glasgow. And the third way is right down the middle. And you can see through Blair Atholl. The first is easy but longer. The second is longer, but definitely not very easy at all. It might be level, but there's all sorts of ravines to get past. And the third is the most direct, but hard to cross, because you had to go across the desolate and snow-prone Dava Moor, because you had to avoid the Slough, which was believed to be uncrossable. And then you had to go over the equally snow-prone Dromocta Pass. The Inverness burgesses, the landowners, the great and the good, first tried in 1845 using Joseph Mitchell's planned route via Nairn, which is there, sort of. It failed because Parliament didn't accept that the steam locomotives of the day could reach the top of the climb up because they didn't have the puff. And just as bad, they couldn't stop on the way down because they didn't have the brakes. So instead, they embarked on a step-by-step approach. First was the Inverness and Nairn Railway, sensibly going between Inverness and Nairn. Secondly, there was the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction Railway, which went from Nairn to Keith. It didn't go from Inverness and it didn't arrive at Aberdeen. But it did go from Nairn to Keith, and it head-butted the enemy's railway slithering up from Aberdeen. The Great North of Scotland Railway was coming up like that, and the Highland was coming like that, and they hit at Keith. That stopped any infiltration from other competitors to come into the Inverness area. The final step was the Inverness and Perth Junction Railway. So the Inverness and Perth Junction Railway didn't go from Inverness, and it didn't go to Perth. But it did join them by coming off the Inverness and Aberdeen Junction Railway, which didn't go from Aberdeen to Inverness. It came at Forres, and it met the Perth and Dunkeld Railway, which itself didn't start at Perth and didn't end at Dunkeld. It started at Stanley and ended at Burnham. It's the the Inverness and Perth Junction Railway that we're interested in. It and Blair Atholl Station opened for business the 9th of September 1863. And I gave a talk about its coming back on its 150th anniversary and wrote said book, which obviously every interested person needs to read and to buy first. Right, enough of the map. Now, you've probably seen this picture before. He is Joseph Mitchell in his old age. He is probably the name most associated with the Highland Railway. After all, he was the first to envisage the railway. He surveyed and planned its route. He built the physical infrastructure. And, as it happens, he's an ancestor of Jamie Troughton in Blair Castle. But of course, he was being paid to do so. And his paymasters were the Inverness and Perth Junction Railway. Now, those paymasters, those purse string holders, were, as I said, the shareholders who were the great and good of Inverness, and also landowners along the route and others. They wouldn't get directly involved day to day, obviously. Instead, they had somebody who would oversee things on their behalf, making sure their money was being well spent. In other words, a traditional clerk of works. Now, that person was the Honourable Thomas Charles Bruce. He was a London-based but Elgin-born barrister and conservative with a big C. Joseph Mitchell was a force to be reckoned with, as we know, with opinionated, probably arrogant through overconfidence and experience, and capable of roughing establishment feathers to such an extent that his 2 volumes of memoirs that he wrote in the 1880s were effectively banned from being published until the 1960s. T.C. Bruce, to shorten down the Honourable Thomas Charles to T.C., he was also a force to be reckoned with, and he was obviously part of the establishment, as well as representing the Big E. He was the son of Lord Elgin, and Lord Elgin, it's the same Lord Elgin who brought the Elgin marbles from Greece. T.C. Bruce was the Earl of Seafield's agent, and he was elected, that's T.C. Bruce, he was elected the first and only chairman of the Inverness and Perth Junction Railway. And thus he was the man driving Mitchell to get the job done. We'll call T.C. Bruce the original Fat Controller. Here he is. As this is in quotes, a rising Conservative contender, he paired up with Sir James Dalrymple Horne Elphinstone, who was, in quotes again, a forceful Conservative to stand for Parliament in Portsmouth. He was an Aberdonian, Elphinstone was, and another decidedly fat controller. Lovely, lovely people. Now, they lost the elections in 1859. Notice this is before the railway. And again in 1865. But they succeeded in 1874 when Bruce stood for 11 years as Member of Parliament for Portsmouth. Now, Portsmouth, I've come up from Portsmouth, as one or two of you may know. That's 550 miles away. When they first failed, these two, they had done much mischief at Portsmouth, acting only in the interests of their cronies. Let's go back to Top Cat. But when the pair succeeded, their supporters were jubilant, and Portsmouth resounded to a version of Pop Goes the Weasel, which was a derogatory pastiche gloating at the victor over the vanquished. The two losers, William Henry Stone Esquire, owner of the Lee Park estate, and Sir William Wyndham Portal, that's a name to conjure with, isn't it? Deputy Chairman of the South Western Railway, are named as well as the two winners. So, Pop Goes the Weasel. Don't sing along. I won't sing it, I'll sort of say it. Here we go. To the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel, Elphinston's at the top of the pole, Bruce is close behind him. Stone's gone home to shupper his park and Portal's gone to find him. This perhaps gives some small insight into why Mitchell said of Bruce that Bruce ably devoted about 10 days per year of his time to the service of the company of the railway. So it's a wash turn of phrase that shows that Mitchell and Bruce did not get on. Bruce put Mitchell under immense pressure to get the job done. Get rid of that, go back to him for a minute. Now, Mitchell buckled under Bruce's pressure. He suffered what appears to have been a stroke, and Mitchell clashed with Bruce over the opening of the line through Blair Atholl. He described it as an adventurous proceeding, with no preliminary trains to test the track, newly employed men unfamiliar with the terrain, and not even any engines. A bit difficult to run a railway like that, isn't it? The first proper train through Blair Atholl was on Sunday, 6th of September 1863, when the directors had a trip from Dunkeld to Kingussie and back. The government inspector inspected the line, declared it fit for opening, and it opened, all on the same day, Wednesday, 9th of September 1863, which Mitchell said was very much against his will and gave rise to much anxiety. He further declared that Mr. Bruce, Imms, interfered in matters best left to professional engineers. Despite his worries about unfinished watercourses, untested track and so on, Mitchell agreed to the Duke of Atholl's insistence on travelling on the new line, although by now the Duke was very ill. On the eve of its being opening, that is Tuesday the 8th of September, a truck was fitted up for the Duke, and accompanied by the Duchess and Mitchell, they travelled down from the county march to Pitlochry. Mitchell writes that the Duke seemed to enjoy the rapid motion in descending from the county march at the rate of 50 miles per hour. Surely an utterly reckless speed on a new-made line. And how fast did they come through Blair Atholl? Can you imagine? It was just like the Titfield Thunderbolt. You know, you can just imagine them kind of hurtling through. Anyway, they all survived. Right, so the railway did get built. This shows, we're now onto more photographs, no cartoons. This shows the railway under construction along the rear of the Atholl Arms. So, see that there's the mill, St Catherine's Mill, there. There's the hotel, there, and the railway line is coming all the way along here. But it's not yet built. Do you see the constructor's hut to the left? Her Majesty the Queen referred to that in her speech just now. There it is, sitting there. That's the one that she visited when she came to Blair Atholl in 1863, I mean, sorry. So this became the not-so-temporary station building, familiar to all the earliest passengers. Now, it's very difficult to see, but there is an engine, and there's a wagon behind it. So it's obviously belonging to the contractors, and it obviously means that the track has been laid, but it doesn't look as though the platforms have been built. So there's just a line going through, one little contractor's engine, and that's about it. This is one of the two types of engines used at opening, when it first opened. The two types were both by a bloke called Alexander Allen, to his design, and his nephew, William Berkeley, was locomotive superintendent, supposedly. His tenure, William Berkeley, it ended in disgrace when he was caught fishing when he should have been superintending. So instead of rescuing engines, he was pinching fish. And as a complete aside, because it's just so bonkers, he went on to, when he got sacked, he went on to run a pub in Liverpool which had the distinctive name of the Dr. Syntax. Wonderful name. It's actually the name of a horse, but Dr. Syntax. Okay, Passenger engines, like this one, were built to a 2-2-2 wheel formation, 2 at the front, 2 in the middle, 2 at the back, and they were called the Glenbarry class. Now, how anyone expected them to climb the hill out of Blair Atholl is beyond me. Indeed, the first train couldn't make it up anyway. But they managed to do the job, albeit after a rebuild, until more suitable engines appeared in 1874 in the shapely shape of the Duke class. This is the rebuild version. Now it's a 240. It's got a familiar name, which is why I included it. Has it got the right spelling? Yes, it's got the modern spelling. It has, that's right. Yeah. That was its second name. The first name happened to be Caithness. And this was the goods engine, so the second of the 2 initial types, and that was a 240. And that was called the Seafield class. The second loco was named Bruce, and the first was named Seafield after his boss. This particular one is Stafford, and that's named after the Duke of Sutherland. Now you can see how small they were. Imagine them in the winter of 1863, not long after the line opened. See the barely there cab that was on all the engines before being extended to be only marginally less exposed. It's been described that the snow would blow in one side and out the other, even at speed. It must have been terrible. These engines, like all good children, needed a comfy house in which to be fed and watered and, perhaps horrors, kept clean. Even their teeth need cleaning. We have plaque, they have clinker. So, to house them, you needed an engine shed. We call it an engine shed, they can call it a comfy home. Now look how sparse the station is. Can you see the station there? There's the shed up there. There's the Atholl Arms. There's the mill. This is taken obviously from up the other side, up Tulloch Hill. There's the engine shed. Just there, the first engine shed. Okay, so the level crossing, when you cross the familiar, where the cottages are today, that's where the engine shed was. That's where it lay. Okay, even at that early stage, I'm not quite sure of the date, but even that early stage, it's about 1865, 1866, something like that, there are 5 bulks of wood propping up. Can you see the shadows on the wall? Can you make them out? Say yes. Yes. Thank you. Right answer. So it was cosy but rickety. So there were complaints about, quote, unsightly engine shed of a temporary nature and the continual passing and repassing of the engine and the ruining of local washing. There's the drying fields. You can just about make out the posts, and there's some cloth, linen, washing lying around. So there were continual complaints about all the smoke and rubbish that was floating around. Now you notice there's only the station building up there. There's no waiting room or anything. So if you concentrate on this little bit here, okay, we've gone to the next one. You look very carefully, I hope, yes. You can see there's another building there. Okay.
Why did they put the engine shed there? Why didn't they put it the other side to make?
It's convenient.
Well, yeah.
For the railway.
Okay.
Just no particular reason really. No, they didn't own the land down there at the time. That was still the Duke's land down there. So they only really had a sliver all the way down, and it was close to the road. The fact that it was close to drying fields, there's washing.
Yeah.
The fact it was close to dwelling, doesn't matter. So, I'll draw your attention to 2 things on this photograph. First of all is the building at the far left. Now I've got my reading specs on so I can hardly see it. Oh yes, there we are. See that there?
Yep.
that little bit there. That is the station's oldest structure to have survived the longest. Now, many of you might recall the station, the building at the end of the platform beside the goods shed, and it was only recently demolished. That one. That is the oldest surviving structure that we have in Blair Atholl. Pity it got knocked down. How many years ago? 5, 6? Something like that. And you can see that's right at the end of the platform, beside the goods shed. I took that in 1964. The second one was the waiting shed. Now, you know what the waiting shed looks like today, but the original one is there. That's what it used to look like. Okay, completely different from today's version. Now, there are hardly any photographs of this shed, and as far as I know, there are none looking across its frontage. You just can't see it. So I've taken the liberty of showing you my model of it, which is gleaned from rating plan drawings of the LMS. So that's what it looks like. It was replaced when one of those chimneys collapsed. I know I've got a photograph of the wreckage somewhere, but I can't actually find it at the moment. But yes, eventually, it didn't get set on fire, but the chimney collapsed. Okay. Back to the domestic facilities for the engines. Having been housed, they needed food and drink first. So here we are, back at another very, very early photograph. There's the mill, Gary side down here. There's a level crossing going across. That's where the signal box is now. And there's a water tank. And of course, oh yeah, and the other thing is that, of course, there's a gasworks. I don't know whether anybody remembers the gasworks, which is just not a sign of that anymore. Right, that's the original. The water tank is the original, okay? And it was built before even the ramshackle engine shed. That might be one reason why the shed was built to be near the water tank. Now, this stored the water for the engines, obviously, but it's right next door to the mill lade, but the water didn't come from the mill lade. Instead, it came from way up Glen Fender. And it came from a source higher than the top of the tank, obviously, because it was way up the glen. And it came through pipes. So there's enough pressure from gravity to fill the tank down there without any need for any pumps at all. You just opened a tap and it filled up. And these pipes had to cross Tilt Road Bridge. And the fact that it flowed uphill and then downhill didn't matter because the pressure was up in Glen Fender down. So, we're now talking about how to get water into engines. This is where it came from. That's the intake dam up Glen Fender. Taken a few years ago now, but that's modern. And it's a horrible photo. It's not a good photograph at all, but we might as well start the story at the beginning. This is where the water went from the stream to the tap. Now, if you can adjust yourself, that's about a foot across. You see the holes? Mm-hmm. That's a spherical football. It's about the size of a football. It's got holes in it. And that's where the water went in. And for all of you who've lived in Blair Atholl for more than 5 or 6 years, that's where your water came from. That's what you drank. Not far away, it popped up again. And this is inside the settling shed. So there it is, it's popped up. And in modern days, it was chlorinated before it came up. And it was chlorinated by hand by one of the people up at Lude. And I've got all the specifications for this shed. 140 cubic yards of filtering material went into the filtration bed, and it had a capacity of 4,000 gallons an hour. Okay. That is Blair Atholl's waterworks, as was. for many, many years. And that's a view from the road. So if you recognise it, that is the settling shed. That is a railway building. Well, the last time I looked it was still there. I don't know where it still is. But obviously that's a historic railway building. And it's up Glen Fender, high above the railway. The unique thing about all this, as probably most are aware by now, is that this arrangement supplied water to the whole of Blair Atholl and the Bridge of Tilt, and include the castle's back lodge. Here's a map, if I can work out how to do the zoom on this. This is a map of the water supply in in Bridge of Tilt. Can you make out the houses, the streets, and you can see how the pipe work, and it's all fed from that football up in Glen Fender, with all the creepy crawlies that fell through it, all the rubbish that came down. That's where you got the water from. Do any of you remember the colour of the water that came out the taps? That's from the Atholl Arms. And no, I haven't peed in the bath. We'll draw a veil over that. Right. We've finished with the water for a second or two. We'll come back to that, I think, if I haven't forgotten what I'm doing. The engine shed that we were talking about that was ramshackle and fell down and all the rest of it. Well, the first engine shed had 2 stalls in it, and the locals didn't like the smelly old hind horses belching smoke. So this is the replacement engine shed, looking down from Tulloch Hill. It was stone built and it had 4 stalls, so twice the size. And that's the one that still exists today. But this is what it looked like when it was first built. And you're looking down on the rear of it, obviously enough. There's the galley and there's the rear of the shed down to the front. Now, when I say built, I don't mean built, I mean rebuilt. The parsimonious Highland Railway demolished the 4-road engine shed at Keith, so 100 miles away? And leaving it as a 2-road affair, and they carted all the material down to Blair Atholl and rebuilt the shed as it is there now. And you can sort of prove that because the windows at Keith are the same as the windows at Blair Atholl. They are the same. Now, as traffic volume increased, including excursions coming to Blair Atholl, such as the Atholl Mercantile Association excursions from Dunkeld to Elgin. Does that thing still exist? Atholl Mercantile Association? No? And with the trains getting heavier, and eventually doubling of the line over Dromochta to Dalwhinnie, demand outstripped capacity. And eventually the rear of the shed was demolished to provide access front and rear, so that the engines could come in at both directions. Now the roof remained until an unfortunate incident during the war when the Canadians were here, when they were using oil-soaked rags to light an engine, they left them on top of a 50-gallon oil drum in the shed. The oil drum exploded. It threw it high in the air, straight through the roof. And of course what happens is that what goes up must come down. So it came back down through the roof again, and it set fire to the roof and to the adjacent offices. As well as the innocent engine, which the men did manage to get out before there was too much damage. Now the roof was replaced it was second-hand from Motherwell. It's still there now. The side offices were left ruined until replaced by the LMS sideshow that we see today. Now it's not quite LMS because those RAF pictures, you'll see them outside there for the first time. It shows 1952, the actual offices being built. You can, if you look at the picture out there, you'll see it's brand new. And you've still got the carpenter's horse outside and various bits of scaffolding. This is what the shed looked like in its ultimate form, looking across to it. If you look at the office side, what the engine shed used to look like before the war, there's no photographs that I can find of it unless it's in a wrecked form. That's my model of the offices. So that's what the shed used to look like before it does now. Now, there used to be doors at both ends, but the engines had an awful habit of poking their buffers through the doors. They didn't quite stop in time, just to see what the weather was like, I suppose. So here's the shot here. And this neatly shows that the engines, and it shows the new offices actually as well. It shows that you've got the house, you've got the restaurant, and you've got even the pub. There's a restaurant with the food, one course called Cole. You could have it either well done or not done at all, maybe, and then you could just drink water. So that was quite convenient. Now, you see the tanks there, the replacement tanks, nice big fat tanks they are. They needed it for all the traffic. Now there's a slight problem that nobody had thought of. The tanks are like toilet cisterns. Use water, they get refilled. Okay? When the engines were thirsty, the village had no water. It ran dry. And arrangements had to be made. And arrangements were made such that the railway only replenished its tanks at certain times of the day, or certain times of the week, so that, for example, Donald Fraser in the station house knew when to have his weekly bath. Because if he did it at the wrong time, he wouldn't have any water for his bath. Now, coal, I think I'll move on a little bit. The coal supplies came from the 5 coal fields. Okay, now I'll come back to that in a while, because they were massive, great big trains that came down. Thought I'd include this one with another view of the water tanks. This is a 440 number 76 called Bruce. This was the 5th loco to be given the name of Bruce, remembering that Bruce in effect built the railway. And it was the first engine built at the Clyde Locomotive Works and was on display at the Edinburgh exhibition in 1886. Highland Railway engines were first class, they were really good. And Blair Atholl would see and service every single one that came through. Look at the snow ploughs in the foreground. There's quite a few of them. They stored them at Blair Atholl for obvious reasons. Less obvious is that the water tanks had a load of canvas bags. And quite often they get frozen and wrecked and all the rest of it, and they'd have to be repaired. So all the canvas bags, and I'll show you a photograph of these silly little canvas bags. This is my model again. There's a canvas bag hanging out there. That's a model of the water tanks. Open at the top, straightforward. Notice also there's a chimney. There's a chimney coming out up there. What on earth has a water tank got doing with the chimney? Well, it got cold in winter, and therefore you had to have a boiler underneath in order to heat up the wrought iron tank to keep the water not frozen. Same for the canvas bags. Now just imagine you had smoke coming out of these chimneys. You had all the engines with the smoke come out of their chimneys. You had water tanks. These things here, they had their own little boiler here. They had holes, 3 or 4, all up. They were all smoking away. They're all lit on a winter's day. Can you imagine the amount of smoke that is just rising gently in the air? Just smoking away. Now, if you're interested in railways, this isn't a Highland Railway engine. This isn't an LMS engine. It's a Southern Railway engine. called Yeovil, West Country class, also called spam cans. And this was taken at locomotive tests in 1948 at Blair Atholl, being filled up. And there's one of these canvas bags actually in operation. It has been said that that was the fastest ever climb up to Dromochta ever made when that thing started off. And it's a bit sobering when you think that the line from Waterloo to Exeter is dead flat, and yet this thing could beat every other engine in the country up to the top of a steep hill. That must have been one heck of a sight. I'll give you another sight. Black fives and snow at Dromochta, absolutely belting along. Notice the snowplough at the front of the engine, and away they go. So this sort of epitomises the Highland Main Line. Okay. Let's have a look at the station building. This is the station building in 1964 that I took, when the waiting room was still there. That's another view. And if I'm not mistaken, this is Jimmy McBain down there. Okay. And you ought to see the chap. Keep an eye on him with the rakish bonnet. There he is, having a fly reed and a fag. Does anybody recognise the paper lady? Anybody? Nope. Well, and I think he's the postman. And that's her bike. I imagine that's her bike sitting there. Right, this is Marcel Graham. Now, he is the signalman in the North Signal Box. He was an ex-professional magician, and he was the professed rival of Ali Bongo. And Ali Bongo, he had a real name, by the way. He was the mentor to Paul Daniels. And Marcel Graham's beef was that Ali Bongo stole some of his jokes. His wife was his assistant. And I interviewed him and his wife at their house in Pitlochry, which is literally beside the railway. They were such interesting characters. Their story of the cat getting scooped up outside the front door by a snowplough and a passing Class 37 and thrown into the bushes, only to return home with still 8 lives intact, remains with me. Right, returning to the station itself. We're going to look at the station, have a quick bash through the station design. Notice all that stuff up there, that filigree. Okay. Notice also, this is a well-known photograph, but it's the only photograph showing a balcony around the station. See the station? Went all the way down the side, all the way and back up again. Okay. You wouldn't think that that balcony was ever there. Just not there. That's 1964 again. Now the station was built in the late 60s, and that's when the Inverness and Ross-shire railways crawling up towards Wick and Thurso were being built, and the station at Blair Atholl used the same design as those stations. So you will have a series of stations here which look very similar to Blair Atholl. Here we are, that's Kildare, Fern, Meikle Ferry, bad photograph, but it's ancient. This is a modern view of the back of Meikle Ferry. It's Blair Atholl without the wings. Here's Bonar Bridge. Did you think that was Blair Atholl? Yes. Yeah? No, it's Bonar Bridge, or Argay as it is called now. And here's Tain. That is very ancient. That's about 1870. And what's that got to do with Blair Atholl? Well, if you go around the other side and look at it, and I've cropped it deliberately, this is Blair Atholl. Tain is Blair Atholl. There we are. That's Tain. But it's only got one story. Okay, so that's right. And on the subject of station buildings, remember the filigree I pointed out that's at the top of Blair Atholl? This is a drawing in the National Archives showing the features of the balcony and the filigree, not for Blair Atholl, but for Alness. So if you want to restore Blair Atholl station, there's your blueprints.
So is the Alness one still there? Alness.
No, it's a bus stop.
It's a bus stop.
It's a bus stop. But at least you've got the drawings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I wouldn't like to say whether the chimneys are the same or not. I don't think so. Right. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I hope I'm not overrunning too much. Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, we did start a bit late, so forbear me. Because I think that you're fed up with me talking probably and looking at still pictures. So how would you like to see a train on the Highland Railway 100 years ago?
Yes.
Say yes. Good. Yes. Now, photographs are all very well, but they're all black and white. So, would you like to see them in colour? Yes. Yes. Good. And would you like to see it moving? Yes. Yay! Well, this is where I'm going to disappoint you. It's not really made 100 years ago. It's not really a real train. It's my layout that I have of Blair Atholl, which at least is in colour. So my camera work is amateurish. It's terrible. And when you've seen John's camera work with the drone and whatnot, mine is disgusting. So, but please forgive me. Forbear with me. Suspend your belief. Just let your imagination run. Let everything else just think of things long past. The first movie I'm going to show is a sky bogie hauling a long cattle train shortly after 1923. Let's say it was exactly 100 years ago today that it ran. And that the sky bogie that you'll see in a minute, they were a development of the earliest engines coming through Blair Atholl. So it's the best representation you'll get of what actually came through Blair Atholl and perhaps what it looked like. Okay, so if I can get the technicals right, we'll have a go. So you can see this is starting off in Blair Atholl. See how many things that you can recognise or not recognise, or things that have changed. There's the signal box. That's the dormitory that there used to be, which used to be the bakery and then the garage, turned around 90 degrees because I couldn't fit it in.
That's the second level crossing, right?
That's the second level crossing that didn't actually cross the track completely. The timber yard. And then we come around and over Tilt Viaduct. Can you see Ben Vracki in the background? Coming up. There it is. Now you get a gold star if you can spot Schiehallion. So give us a shout if you can see Schiehallion. This is me taking liberties with geography. I'm way up to Altness-Lanark Bridge now, the last timber viaduct in British Railways that is still operational. Here it is. Just imagine those engines going through at all weathers, all times of the day and night for many, many years. If you didn't spot it, that's Schiehallion in the background. Do you recognise it? Oh, good. You can see it. You can see it if you go up any of the estate tracks to the east of the railway. and it comes into view quite quickly. Here we are supposedly at the summit, so you've got to twist your mind around to come back down. So we're up at the Bora Badenoch in the Sow of Atholl, and coming through, there's the black tank, and there's that amazing sun up in the sky that says 3:25. That structure to the left is a snow fence. And if you look very far away, that is supposed to be Ben McDewey, right in the background. It's supposed to be up on the top of the Cairngorms, about 30 miles away. Actually, it started out as a water stain. Can you see all the there's a signal box at Blair Atholl North. It's the wrong side of the track, but I don't like looking at the back of boxes. I'd rather look at the front. There's the Banvey Burn. And now we're coming back into the station, and you can recognise, hopefully, some various bits of buildings and cottages, and the loco shed pops into view. Those are the, I'll come round to that later. We've just passed the public urinals in the station platform. Most peculiar place that they were placed. So you see all the vertical poles that are coming up. They're for signal wires. They were kept off the ground, several feet in the air. It was, I don't know if it was unique to the Highland or not, but it pretty well was unique. It stopped people tripping over them, but it also meant they got out of the way of snow. So the sky bogey's got up a bit of speed. It will come back round into the station again. That gives a full view of the length of the train. And that would be about the length of the train that they actually would pull. It's 25, I think it's 26 wagons. As I say, you try controlling a train, holding a camera, looking through it and trying to get everything to work at the same time. I can't. I can hardly do it. But there's worse to come. And that's the summit where the engines will come off. We'll see that in a minute. Okay. At least I hope we will. And then we come round again. Okay. So I'll pause it at that point there, because you've seen enough. Unless you want me to carry on. I'll pause the movie, that is. There we go. Okay. Right, now then, back to here again. Right. I'm talking about banking. And this is one of the banking engines. Number 68. And there it is, just after the war. Filthy, dirty. Blokes there getting it ready to go back down to Perth, probably. But it must have had some hefty trains to push. So what I'll do is that I'll finish off with another short movie and a poem, if you don't mind, if you can suffer it. So we'll try and do this. Let me get my notes in the right position. Right, this is this is a poem called Driver John Macpherson's Farewell to His Engine. And it's by the so-called roadside poet John MacDonald, who was station master at Dalguise. The movie is of this exact locomotive, and it's exactly the right time. So again, hold your imagination in suspension. Can we imagine that the driver leaning on the cab is indeed driver John Macpherson? The movie shows number 44 returning from the summit back to Blair Atholl. Could this be John Macpherson's final trip? So these eloquent and moving verses epitomise the feelings the railway workers had towards Blair Atholl. Right, okay, let's have a go. Driver John Macpherson's farewell to his engine. Farewell, my true and trusted steed, my faithful 44. Farewell, my loving idle sweet, whose pace I'll guide no more, who has not seen a shop for years where others oft have been, and clad anew, yet thou still wear the garb of bonny green. Farewell, the voice whose music sweet oft sounded in my ear. Farewell, the throbbing of thy heart, thy cough so true and clear, responding promptly to my hand beneath each heavy load, whose comely brow I often wiped at stations on the road. I've oft been cussed for running slow, some wished that I was dead. The wonder is I'm here with such dire wishes on my head. I knew I many crossings lost by tending you with care, yet still I ran to table time and nursed your form so fair. I paced the track in times gone by with Barney, Loch and Ben, and climbed Drumochta's barren crest with castle and with glen. I parted with them all without a sigh or heartache sure, such as I feel in saying goodbye to thee, sweet 44. When winter's winds shall whistle loud and snowdrift blind the pane, I'll smoke my pipe at eventide and pace the track again. And when the shades of night will fall, maybe to rise no more, I'll hear the beating of your heart, my dear old 44. There we are. And you'll see that when it shuggles around, that is the engine number 44 with John Macpherson on his last journey, coming back to retire, 31st of March 1925. There you go. Thank you.